So today I wanted to interview Eric Caren. He is one of the greatest collectors of historical paper. He's known to many dealers and collectors worldwide as sort of the Babe Ruth of historical collecting, I would say. Although I don't know, you've probably hit more home runs than Babe Ruth. I think you only had like 700 or something, right? And
Please.
I think you've scored quite a lot. Now, Eric, the reason I wanted to interview you, first of all, was I came across, it popped up, of course, in my feed. You have an upcoming auction on April 18th at Potter and Potter, and it is labeled your 9th auction. And
Correct.
what collector has 9 auctions? Normally, when these great collections, I would say, come up, it's usually the collector has passed or something has happened, and it's a very rare opportunity, I would say, to talk to collectors having very serious auctions, who is not already embalmed and mummified, but of course, it's,
I'm happy not to be embalmed and mummified, Adam.
who's well and kicking. So let me start off with one quick question, Eric, for you.
Sure.
How many items are in your collection?
Well, I usually respond with about 1 million, and then I follow with, of course, I haven't counted. So I think it's pretty safe to say that there are approximately 1 million printed manuscript and photographic originals in the collection.
So it's really a proverbial drop in the bucket, even though there are exceptional things that are coming up. Now, one of the first things I want to ask you is, your auctions are entitled How History Unfolds on Paper. What does that mean?
Well, it is broad and yet precise. It means that I cover essentially 5 centuries, from the 16th century through the 20th century. And I like major events, major genres, the history of media. And people are always, when I go to a show, I'll ask a friendly colleague, do you have anything for me? And he or she will respond, Eric, from the last group you bought, I really don't know what you're going to buy. And in fact, that's happened with you. Sometimes when I've made some nice purchases from you, you were very openly surprised that I was interested in the things, because I'm interested in the whole swath of modern history, from Columbus through the computer age. And I don't think there are too many lunatics out there who've attempted to collect everything, meaning to try and have something on every major event, genre, historical figure, etc. For a number of years, the only thing I was missing, and again, but my great focus is Americana, but I do include, because I'm interested in news, Europe, continental material involving major events, and English material as well. And so I'm not strong in, say, Africa or any particular genre, but I think I have representation for most genres. I mean, what comes to mind is when the New York Herald sent Stanley to find Dr. Livingston and reported Dr. Livingston, I presume. There's an example of an important event that's both American and African history.
So truly all of human history. Now, I wanted to, one thing, because we're talking to a general audience, I wanted to start with a little bit about the market and then get to some personal history, I would say.
Sure.
And I would like you to talk, what generally do you consider the historical paper market for people who do not know?
Well, when I started, God, I hate to remind myself of my age, 6 decades ago, I almost said 6 centuries ago, because I'm constantly saying 5 centuries of collecting. the paper was junk. When as an 11-year-old, I was specializing. I started collecting the usual baseball cards, stamps, fossils, coins, you name it, at the age of 5. But at 11, I started with rare newspapers. And when I would ask for them at rare book shows or antique shows, I'd get laughed at. And I only use them to wrap fish. I don't buy them.
Sure.
Well, that's changed quite a bit because of the internet. So many books, as you know, for the right amount of money, you can find a great author and their first edition, so you need to find more unique copies of works, as you are very good at doing. Paper has risen dramatically over the years. Our mutual friend, Bruce McKinney, Rare Book Hub, is constantly pointing out record prices in historical paper items, which of course can include everything from comic books and baseball cards to, you name it, printed, manuscript, and photographic. So I would say the market is very strong. The old, fun, traditional ways of buying are largely displaced by what we're doing right now, internet. So face-to-face conventions are dropping off. Paper shows, yes, there's still a lot of them, but I make a bad joke that the average age is deceased in the attendees, and it's less funny as I approach my 65th birthday.
Now, you must be like me, shocked when you see the occasional headline, like I would say a Mickey Mantle rookie card gets $12 million, or a first appearance of Superman gets in the millions. That can't be all important historic paper. But how does that change the market, or make the market appear in your eyes? And what is the price range for the type of material you can find and collect that is of historic interest?
Okay, so I prepared for you a little show and tell of 5 centuries worth of things that I grabbed for the purpose of this video. And you may hate me because the last item is a slabbed baseball item, but it's not your typical Mickey Mantle rookie card or Babe Ruth Gowdy card or, comic book, silver or golden age comic book. It means that there are millions of opportunities to buy fabulous things at very, very friendly prices. For instance, I just purchased King Charles I's letter to the governor of Virginia Colony, Berkeley, from 1651 for $8,000. If the equivalent rarity of that in a baseball card or comic book would make it a 7-figure item. So I think that it's a double-edged sword. It depends on whether you're a dealer or a collector. But I think even dealers will agree that paper is good, because when you find something interesting in paper, chances are you don't have 10 other people that are offering the same thing somewhere.
So let me ask you this then, just before we look at some of the items in your so-called show and tell. But
okay,
why do you think—
my favorite subject when I was a kid? I would still go back to elementary school just to watch show and tell.
Oh yeah, I'm sure you brought in a few of the more curious objects in elementary school. No, but why do you think the market is so undervalued? Why would a single baseball card, of which there are a lot of surviving Mickey Mantle cards, get in the millions, but an important American broadside, might bring substantially less?
Well, John Dan, in a book many years ago, he was head of Clements Library at University of Michigan, speculated that because finding any particular thing in paper is difficult, it's more difficult to make a market for it. Also, it doesn't lend itself, or at least it hasn't yet, to slabbing. You have to have something that is rare, but easy enough for the average person to find to make it worthwhile collecting. So for instance, if I had decided just to collect 17th century colonial letters, I'd have a very small collection and I wouldn't get that adrenaline rush and that euphoric feeling very often. So I think that also nostalgia definitely plays a role. More and more people are thinking about their the past in their life and not, say, the history of the modern world.
In rare,
I would add one thing, Adam. A lot of people still are not aware that a lot of magnificent things and extremely rare things are available. I recently did another interview with somebody who's been in collecting for many years, and he said, "I'm stunned that you have George Washington's commission to be commander-in-chief in your auction." So a lot of people say, "Oh no, it's too good to be true. That can't be real."
I guess that is a question of authenticity. Like, as a rare book dealer, I don't face questions of authenticity too often. It's very hard to fake an entire book. But of course, you can fake signatures, you can fake, I presume, documents. How do you deal with authenticity issues?
Well, happily, there have not been many fakes made of any paper, Americana or ephemera, if you will. I'm an early director of the Ephemera Society of America, but never really liked the word, to be honest, because it has the other connotation, something you throw away. But the fakes that come to mind with rare newspapers are just the death of Washington in the Ulster County Gazette and the assassination of Lincoln in the New York Herald. With photographs, with 19th century photographs, people are making laser copies and putting them on old mounts. So you do have to look out for that. Letters and diaries and broadsides and most of what I collect are much more difficult to fake. Even, say, press photos.
Sure.
There is a way by looking at the paper, the photographic paper and the printed material on the verso, that you can be sure that it's original.
Yeah, and I guess you would need a tremendous amount of knowledge, both technical and historical, to pull something off. And I always say, if you have enough of that, why go into the criminal world when you can become a book dealer, right?
I won't touch that line. A lot of things come to mind.
So let's look at some of the stuff you have there. You want to lead off with some of your elementary school show and tell?
Okay, so I'm going to back up because this is the largest of the items, going in chronological order, 16th through 20th century. This is, I have a feeling I have to back up even more. Do you have a good view of it now?
Yeah, you're going to raise it a little bit up. There we go.
So this is a contemporary engraving. The British Library estimates that this was done soon after the execution of who we see here, Mary, Queen of Scots. And if I hold it correctly, which I'm a technical idiot, so forgive me, you can see here the actual execution of Mary, Queen of Scots, which happened in 1589. They estimate this engraving to date from that year or the year after. And then, of course, you have to hold the head of the recently deceased. Let's hope you and I go in a much more pleasant manner. And so here's an example of something you might not think that I would include in my collection. It's an engraving, but I call it a news engraving because it commemorates the recent event of the execution of Mary, Queen of Scots.
Yeah, it's relating in a very visual way exactly what happened.
Yes, and it's extremely rare. I think there are only maybe 2 other known copies in existence.
That's, yeah, almost like a visual broadside, basically.
Speaking of which, so this is a 1624.
If you can raise it up.
1624. Can you see it?
Yes, postscript.
Postscript to Good News from New England, 1624 edition. That work, as you I'm sure know, is extraordinarily rare. And this postscript is really meant to be, and it's blank on the verso, is meant to be an advertisement from the publisher of the narratives of the Mayflower and Plymouth colony. And I'm really pleased to own this, because I think I'll have to live another 500 years and be 500 times as wealthy if another copy of Good News from New England from 1624 comes out. The next thing I brought, people are very well aware, who are historians, of the famous Paul Revere Boston Massacre. Well, a lot of people don't know that the engraving first appeared in England. And in this case, this is from the Freeholders magazine in 1770. And so this was a copperplate news engraving of the massacre that appeared soon after the massacre, which was March 5th, I think, of 1770.
So was that inspiration for the American imprint?
Yes, Paul Revere was a copier, albeit a very great and popular one. I really love Native American photography. You could probably tell that if you can see the backdrop. And am I holding this
Yeah,
well
that's
enough?
fine.
Okay, so this is one of my favorite Native American photographs. This is Geronimo, and this photo was taken by one Fly. His last name was Fly, out of Tombstone, Arizona, in 1884. And what's interesting about this series of photos that Fly took is they were hostiles at the time these were published. In other words, they were negotiating peace with General Crook and changed their minds and went back on the warpath for another 2 years until his final surrender in 1886. And you've got a little back sticker, a contemporary back sticker affixed to it by Fly, describing Geronimo and, of course, the date. This was really the first important, this is a boudoir cabinet photograph, albumen. And he, with a very small band of warriors, held off the U.S. Army for quite some time, and he was quite feared. The last thing I brought is, you happen to mention Mickey Mantle.
Sure.
And this is the original art to make this baseball card. And I don't even have my glasses on. This guy is so unknown that the only reason this was of interest was because I have the one-of-a-kind original art to make the top 1952 baseball card. I think his name is Eddie Miskus. I don't want to offend his family.
Is there a lot of surviving artwork for baseball cards like that? I don't think I've ever seen that.
No, I think this was the only year that that Topps used original artwork to create the cards rather than photographs. So there you have a little show and tell of 5 centuries. I'd like to tell you a little bit, if I may, about what all is in the auction.
Yeah, sure. Well, I'll get that in just 1 second. I want to get, but I just want to ask you one more thing.
Sure.
How do you see like the market evolving? I mean, like you showed some baseball cards there. They were, or I don't, those weren't slab necessarily, at least in plastic. But do you think, how do you see the future of historical paper collecting now that the old timers are retiring and everything's online?
I think as long as people are interested in various people in history. Look, I always say, when somebody says they're not interested in history, I say you're lying. You just don't know you're interested in history. History is sex, drugs, and rock and roll. And all 3 are well represented in my collection. I mean, we don't like to think of our parents or grandparents having conceived us, but sex, you look at ancient art, you've got pornography. So you can find virtually any subject in books, in manuscripts, in newspapers, in photographs, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
So
So I think that there'll always be a future as long as people have some interest in history, or we do a better job of getting the word out that, hey, we're not a bunch of intellectual snobs. These things are available. You know, you don't have to put on white gloves to handle them. You don't have to feel afraid to ask a question, because no question is a stupid question. None of us started with the immense amount of knowledge. And by the way, forgive me, this is not patronizing you. I've asked you this before. Do you have work from a script? When you start describing things in myriad languages and myriad genres, I'm mystified. I could barely speak English.
I wouldn't turn the camera in that sense on me. I want to ask you, now let's talk about the auction coming up. One interesting thing about the auction, of course, is collectors normally don't have these multiple auctions. Why have you chosen that route to sell things?
Well, there's a great benefit beyond the fact that I get the obvious monetary satisfaction, and that is that if I can't keep the items, then I certainly can't afford to keep 1 million items. I could share them with other people, and more importantly and selfishly, I get a catalog for each of the auctions. So those catalogs, you know, the 8 auctions I've had before were at Christie's, Sotheby's, Bonham's, Swan, and Cowan's, with multiples at 2 of them.
It sort of
So if I
immortalizes
can't,
the collection for you.
pardon me?
Sort of immortalizes the collection for you.
Yeah, and when I want to look at my old children, as opposed to my million existing children, I just open the catalog and reminisce.
Yeah.
So it's a nice way to have my cake and eat it too. If I had unlimited funds, I probably wouldn't sell anything.
It's also, I have to say, there's a certain pleasure in seeing an item well cataloged and put in its historical context, because it's impossible to do that as a collector for everything. You may have a sense of its history, you may think about it, but unless you see it on paper described, really encapsulating what you thought about it.
You're absolutely right. You as a book dealer need to and do it very well cataloging. When I used to do collector shows, you know, I would have an item and I'd have it in a holder, and I might have a little, what are those things called where you print out like a little piece of typed tape and affix it to the holder. And that was my whole description. You know, anything in addition would be verbal. And was it because I was lazy? Was it because I wasn't schooled bibliographically? A combination of numerous factors. I also like to think that the types of things that I like almost speak for themselves. But you're right, a professional description is extremely helpful, particularly to those who are thinking about making a major investment in an item. They want to know all they can possibly know about the piece.
So what are a couple, 2 or 3 of your favorite items that you've placed into your next sale?
Well, far and away, the greatest item is George Washington's commission to be commander-in-chief in June of 1775. It was inked on vellum and attested to by Charles Thomson, Secretary of the Continental Congress. And Michael Brown, a member of the ABAA, and others believe the whole thing to be holograph, all in the hand of Charles Thomson. The estimate is modest. It's 150 to 250,000. But then I've got a lot of items that are in the hundreds of dollars that are great fun. For instance, people think of fake news, Dewey defeats Truman, mistake that Chicago Tribune made. But I've got an 1877 newspaper that in one column on the front page says Rutherford B. Hayes was elected president. In another column on the front page, it says Samuel Tilden has been elected president.
Sure.
Well, something wrong there. So I've got a Babe Ruth signed photo. I've got 16th century examples of news. I've got 17th and 18th and 19th century Americana, great items on outlaws. I've got a wonderful Blackbeard, Death of Blackbeard periodical that's very rare that was edited and published by Defoe. In the same year, he printed Robinson Crusoe. Things like that. When people ask me, do you hate to give these things up? The answer is yes, yes. But I know that if I don't put enough meat on the bone in my auction, it's not going to be good for anybody.
Yeah. So seasoned collectors, as well as people new to the collecting field, of course, if they want to go out and buy, they can check out your auction at Potter and Potter. But I'm sure they are all going to want to know, where do you go shopping to find material like this?
A friend of mine always had the answer. I could tell you, but then I have to kill you. I could tell you that when I was very young, I caught on that for newspapers, libraries were then microfilming newspapers. At the age of 15, I got 8,000 free newspapers, 19th century free newspapers from a library that I won't name because I don't like to embarrass them. And so microfilming period was a very good period for buying. But the answer is sadly, often given everywhere that you can think of. Think outside of the box is always the best advice. If everybody's running in this direction, you run in the other direction. Sometimes it's as simple. I'll give you an example. One time after an ABAA show in New York, I usually don't buy foreign language material, but there was a really early Nazi broadside, 1920. And I thought, this is extremely rare. The party was very small then. And although it was not illustrated, because I do include illustrated things in other languages, I thought maybe I ought to buy this. And it was about $16,000, but I passed on it. I wanted to convince myself that at any moment I could get a sleeper. So I went back home and I did a search on one of the platforms, buying platforms for Nazi Adolf Hitler, starting with high price.
Sure.
Well, most people would have given up, going from 6 figures to 5 figures to 4 figures. I just kept going. And at $350, the equivalent in Germany was a 1919 handbill for Lincoln. Wow, what a horrible, horrible, horrible. It's not even a Freudian slip. I apologize to everyone. You can leave that in because I'm human. Hitler only had, Hitler attended this meeting with less than 100 members of what was not even called the the NSDAP yet. And they spelled his name wrong with 2 T's. That's how primitive this handbill was. And so I got an even earlier broadside just by persistence, by not giving up. I still can't believe I said Lincoln. The reason I just figured out is I've got Jeffrey Mazzaro's incredible Lincoln collage in my auction, which is our first collaboration, which is 5 feet by 4 feet and uses only damaged originals from my archive. And that thing has gone viral. So that, forgive me, that's in the back of my head all the time. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that.
No, I think probably the easy way to mix it up is a great collector has every name at all times in their heads.
We don't differentiate between evil and good. If it's historical, at least in my case, I think it's worthy of keeping, because Santayana saying, those who do not study history are condemned to repeat it. I think that was essentially it. I believe that thoroughly. I don't think that collecting should be censored.
Sure. Well, I think we're running out, unfortunately, on Zoom time. They've set some new limits for us. But I'm going to put, in the comments below some biographical information. I know you've had some interviews online. People can check out about your personal history, because we didn't have enough time to touch about your youth and collecting. Maybe we'll do another interview in the future to get into some of that. And of course,
the abandoned house story, if you'd like, the next time. The Potter and Potter auction is live for bidding right now and ends on April 18th.
So I'll put the details that below for you. And of course, I
Thank
wish
you.
you luck with that so you can
Thank you, Adam.
get more funds and continue to make great discoveries in the field as always.
Well, the field needs, and I've said this to you, and I don't patronize, the field needs more people like you. You are scholarly, but you are not a snob.
Well,
And that's a great combination. And there are more like you out there.
there
I'd
are,
like to think that
I can
I'd
attest to
like
the
to think
fact that a
that
lot
I'm
of my colleagues are wonderful people. So it's a fun and fascinating field. And Eric, thank you so much. And I'll
thank
put
you,
my
Adam.
info below. We'll be in touch.